My name is Tamara Rockwood. Today is February 15th in 2025. This is episode 17. And I'm really impressed with myself that we are doing 17 episodes of a podcast. I wasn't sure if I had anything to say. You never know. You never know until you start writing or until you start going. And honestly, I'm loving discussing the poetry that we have published or that other people have written. I'm just delighted. And that was kind of my benchmark. Can I talk about poetry for 10 minutes? Yes, I can. So this week has actually been a very busy week for us because we just had a huge event on Bainbridge Island. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. But last year, we had an event on the island, and it was at Eagle Harbor Book Company, and we celebrated our 1-year anniversary, and it was wonderful, and we packed the bookstore, and they were extremely helpful. It was just, everything was great. But what we were able to do was we wanted to introduce ourselves to the community, because after 1 year, and like it was a year where half the year we were learning software and legal issues, making sure that our contracts that we were writing were appropriate, and we're working with a lawyer. We just wanted to make sure that we knew what we were doing before we really got into it, because we want to protect we're going to be fine as a company, but I wanted to make sure that we protected the poets' work and their rights and what we were allowed and not allowed to do with their work and royalties and whatnot. There is not a whole bunch of money in poetry, but there's enough that you just don't want to mess with people. I think that is just the nice thing to do. And also, we are a for-profit company. We are not a nonprofit company. And so we are not writing grants, or we aren't asking for grants. We aren't asking for anything. We want to be able to just sell the books and support the authors. So that was, so last year we had a panel of about 5, maybe 6 poets, and they were able to tell their story and read their poetry, and it was great. And so this year we had an event, but it was not a 2-year anniversary. Actually, this year we celebrated something that we have been working on for quite a while, definitely since last year. But this year we celebrated the Bainbridge Island Poetry Awards event. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous because it's such a monumental thing to do. And I wanted to make sure that, again, we represent the people and the poets and the community in a noble and respectful way. This is about celebrating the poets and not celebrating ourselves. We're the conduit in order to make sure that people have a spotlight on them. So we had 3 distinct honors to celebrate the pillars of our poetry community. So the first one was the Nancy Ricow Memorial Award. And I will be completely forthright in saying that I actually already recorded this section, but I went on forever about the Nancy Ricow Memorial Award because her legacy is so large. I was able to meet her one time, but she lived a very long life, and she tragically passed away a few years ago. And the thing is, I've been publishing poets and poetry on Bainbridge Island, and also from Port Townsend and Port Angeles all the way down to the Pierce Peninsula. So basically like Western Washington, besides everything south of that into Olympia. It's like, I haven't gone there yet, baby. But everyone in every single county has had a memory of Nancy Ricow somehow. And people tell me about this. And it was last year someone emailed me about a question, and then they were mentioning a memory they had of Nancy Ricow, and I'm like, her name is a legacy, and I don't want people to forget. They aren't going to forget, but I think that we should honor her with a Nancy Ricow Poetry Memorial Award. I think that would be honoring to her memory and to her legacy. So we first asked some of her closest friends, and we're like, is this okay? Are you going to be okay? Like, is this overstepping, or is this going to be a respectful way of honoring her memory? And her friends were like, that is so sweet. And yes, that is, they were full support. And I know one of her sons, and so we emailed him, my husband and I, and we're like, this is what we're thinking. We would really like your blessing on this because it is your mother's name, but she just has such a huge legacy, and we want to continue her name it feels appropriate. And so we just wanted to know if it was okay. And he's just like, I think that that's great. He was very supportive, and then he talked it over with his siblings, and we got their blessing, and so we were able to move on with that. So that one recognizes poets who carry forward her legacy of nurturing, supporting, educating poets in our community. Another award that we did was the Bainbridge Island Poet of the Year Award, and that was so much fun because both of these were chosen by the community vote. Ben and I did not have any hand in it. We did not vote for either one of them. We opened up the voting to the community, and we said, who would you choose for the Nancy Ricow Memorial Award? Who would you choose for the Bainbridge Island Poet of the Year Award? And what was so wonderful is you couldn't just say this person. You had to say this person and why. We didn't want just a brigade of one person. Like, you have to tell us, like, why do you think this person deserves this award? So some of the feedback we got, there was a lot of feedback. There was a lot of votes. And some of them I'll share with you. I shared it with the audience on Thursday. One voter said, because this poet is a great poetry writer and an amazing friend. Another said, I've been following this poet for years, always have loved their work, and this poet as a person. Another voter said, this poet is one of the most prolific and accomplished poets we have on Bainbridge Island. As a longtime supporter of the arts, this poet's skill at reading and providing feedback has enriched countless local poets. And I remember that one in particular because he would be so, I think he would be overwhelmed and blushing if he knew that was written about him, but it's right. This poet's poetry grabs the reader by the heart. The lean, clear, evocative verse reveals deep connections to the natural world. Their poems touch our spirits, our joys, and our struggles. And then finally, another poet was recognized for keeping alive local poetry endeavors and supporting local poets, a testament to their dedication to our community. So those were the awards that were open to voting, and the community voted for who won. Finally, there was one that was not open to voting, and actually we didn't tell anyone about it because we wanted to let everyone know. And next year, everyone's going to know. But there was a special Lifetime Achievement Award that we presented, and that one was very special because while our first two honors were chosen by the community vote, Ben and I felt compelled to recognize someone whose lifelong dedication to poetry has profoundly shaped our literary landscape on the island. And that was, that one in particular was very, very special because when we presented it, I'll tell you who it is in a second, but when we presented it, I told her beforehand so she knew and she was able to prepare something to talk about. But I could hear in the audience when we were describing this person and why they were getting the Lifetime Achievement Award. I could hear her name in the audience. Everyone knew who this was before we said her name. What she's done is beautiful, and it has been generous. And anyways, she's one of the most lovely people that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. So that all being said, the winners of the Bainbridge Island Poetry Awards for 2025, the Nancy Ricow Memorial Award went to Michelle Bombardier, who is the Poet Laureate of Bainbridge Island, and I could not support that more. I was delighted to tally up the votes. I'm like, that is the rightest thing I could think. I was so happy. I was happy for everyone else who was nominated, but that one felt right, and so many congratulations. The Bainbridge Island Poet of the Year Award went to a new poet on the island, and her name is Michaela Smith. And she got more votes than I would like to tell you. She got so many votes. She has such a support of readers around her, and they wrote exactly why they thought that she should deserve this award, and every single reason was different. So another beautiful, kind heart in poetry, and she's working on her second book. Her first book was actually published by Bainbridge Island Press. It was Super Bloom, and that is written for young women. Beautiful verse. I really enjoyed publishing that, and I'm not going to talk more about it because I'm already going way over my time limit. But the third, the Lifetime Achievement Award was for Sue Hyland, and Sue Hyland is a absolute gem of Bainbridge Island. She has served poetry in the Parks Department. She has served poetry in workshops. She has provided spaces for people to do workshopping together and for people to get published. She just is such a lovely person, and so that is what we've been doing this week, and I could talk more about it, but we have to get on to the poetry because I've already gone over my 10-minute limit, so hold on. Okay, so the poem that we're reading today is titled Hey Coyote. I love this poem. It is published in POETICS Coyote. And before I talk about that, before we listen to the poem, I want to tell you about the poet who wrote this poem. Elisabeth Sharp McKetta wrote Hey Coyote. She is one of the most beautiful people that I have had the pleasure of meeting and working with. We met, I was one of her students, but she has done incredible. She has more energy than I do, and I have more energy than, the sun. She has written quite a few books already. You should 100% look her up, either on ElisabethSharpMcKetta.com. You can find her books in independent bookstores. You can find it online. She has written 13 books across genres. She has written a book called Edit Your Life. She has written She Never Told Me About the Ocean. That is a beautiful book. She also has published many poems. She has also given a TEDx Boise talk, and the title is Edit Your Life Like a Poem. I cannot recommend that enough. She has literature degrees from Harvard, her bachelor's. She has a master's from Georgetown. She has a PhD from the University of Texas at Austin. Her PhD dissertation was the intersections between memoir and myth, and it changed the way that she looks at the world, and it's just lovely. We have had many conversations about fairy tales. She teaches at the Harvard Extension School writing program and at Oxford University's Diploma in Creative Writing, and she also does mentor groups And also, I just have to plug her website. If you can find her website, elisabethsharpmcketta.com. She has a link on there that gives you writing prompts. And I usually don't use writing prompts. I can usually come up with it on my own. But her writing prompts are the best I've ever used. And if you just go there for that alone, it's going to be worth your time. So we're going to listen to her read Hey Coyote, and then we're going to discuss it.
Hey Coyote. It is a job to hoist a word up from somewhere and force it to grow somewhere else. It is a job to sun and water a word until its roots explode and shake. It is a job, or is it, to mumble into the soil, to scale away the rot. Somebody must spray griffonage into ears, alleyways, and the torn leaves of books. Hey poet. Hey coyote. You call this your life, smuggling words across borders.
Okay, so let's talk about this poem. Hey Coyote. The title is addressing the coyote. That is immediate. We know to whom we're speaking. And at the same time, very quickly, we go from saying, the poet is saying, we're talking about words. We're talking about where words go. We're talking about about the coyote smuggling words. And then we're talking about the poet being the trickster figure as the coyote. She says, hey coyote. And then she transitions to make it very clear, hey poet. The poets are portrayed as outlaws or tricksters who are moving from one realm to another. The casual hey is addressing a kind of outlaw camaraderie. The labor of writing as growth and cultivation. The verbs that we're looking at in here are being framed as writing as manual labor through agricultural metaphors. We have hoist, grow, sun and water, roots, soil, rot. Granted, some of those were nouns, but stay with me. There is tension between natural growth and forced cultivation. There's a repeated phrase, it is a job, which emphasizes the work aspect. Well, the question is, or is it? And that suggests an uncertainty about whether this should be viewed as labor. These themes can be explored in depth, but how does this poem transform the romantic idea of the poet into something more subversive? How does this poem challenge our notion of whether art should be viewed as work or as something else? The way that this poem uses the botanical imagery to discuss abstract concepts like language and creativity is wonderfully fun. I think what I like about this poem the most is that it raises a question. It does not answer the question. And that is something that is very important in poetry. Poetry is not an essay. We're not writing poetry in order to say, I believe that love is a red, red rose. And these are the 3 reasons why, and here's the conclusion. This poem exemplifies the use of poetry to pose a question. What is this poem doing? What is the poet? What is their role? And when the poet here is joining, is bridging the trickster figure from the coyote directly to the poet, then we see that there is a trickster figure in the poet, that we are utilizing this art in language in different ways. And it comes in different forms. And different poems have different shapes. And these shapes are taking on different meanings. The form of a poem, I will say this forever. So people who know me have heard me say this. But it is just helpful for me to remember. It's a wonderful mnemonic. The form must reflect the function. So if you have a very sincere, deep, romantic poem about love, you would want to use a form that reflects that. So it's usually in sonnets or some sort of formal gesture. If it is something a little bit more lighthearted, then it can be more freeform. You can not use verse and rhyming and meter as tightly. You can use the entire page. You could write a sonnet in an entire page. Sonnets just need, the octave and the volta. But that's what I wanted to emphasize in this. It is the use of economy of the language is like a scalpel, and the words that were said were meant to be said, and the rest of the thought is in the reader. And because I've read this poem a million times, and every time I read it, it says something different to me. I'm thinking about myself more because I'm thinking of the poet. What is the poet doing in this? There is an outlaw element. I would like to think that I am a very law-abiding person. I'm kind of terrified of breaking the law. I drive the speed limit, the whole deal. I put my grocery cart away at the grocery store, just kind of down the line. I'm sure that I have some vices that I don't need to put onto a podcast, but they're nothing that I just don't think that they're that big. So the idea of the poet being an outlaw is something outrageous, at least for me. And I think that it should be something outrageous because what does the poet do with language? We're using figurative language to describe these gigantic issues, these gigantic feelings, but we're using metaphors in a way that are turning the entire image into a different meaning. Can we say that love is a red, red rose? Roses have thorns and they die. Is that love? I don't know. There's a lot going on. I would encourage you to find POETICS Coyote. You can buy it on, I know that I'm trying to sell the books, but it's just because I love these poems and they're really great. So her poetry is in POETICS Coyote. You can find that in any independent bookstore. You can find it on our website. Find it, read it, love it. I think that you should photocopy it and put it on your wall. I don't have a problem with that. So anyways, it was one of my favorite poems. So Elisabeth, thank you so much. It was beautiful. I loved it. Okay, party people. I have not gone too far over. I don't think I will ever meet the 10 minutes that I thought that I would keep in parameters, but you know what? It's good. It's all good. Poetry is good for you. It's good for your soul. So that is it for today, party people. If you've enjoyed diving into the world of verse with us, join us next time where we've got more poets to meet, more poems to explore, and more literary adventures to share. Until then, keep reading, keep writing, and keep poetry close to your heart. Thank you for joining POETICS Podcast, where we bring poetry to life one verse at a time.